Hey guys, Steinixos here. So today we'll be talking about Shanks and his impact on the One Piece world. Now, there's quite a few important characters in the One Piece story, but very few are as influential as Shanks. I mean, it's literally not an exaggeration to say that Shanks is one of the main reasons the story of One Piece exists as it does. Like, Shanks is obviously not responsible for things like the Void Century or the starting of the Great Pirate Era, because those are more foundational background things onto which the story of One Piece and all the characters are built. Shanks is more of a mover or a balancer who operates in the dynamic world that sprung forth from this lore. So with that understood, let us go through exactly why Shanks is the reason One Piece exists. Now, one of the major plot points of the One Piece story is the existence of a figure known as Joy Boy, who operated in the Void Century and who seemed to be the main force against the world government. Now, not much is currently known about Joy Boy. However, we do know that the Nicofruit seems to be heavily related to Joy Boy, and I mean, this is evident in the fact that the world government went out of their way to change the name of the fruit in an attempt to hide its true nature. Even someone as inconsequential as a regular prison guard was completely erased just for mentioning Nika. And for the 800 years of usage since the Void Century and prior to Luffy, no one has awakened the Nicofruit. And there was no new Joy Boy. But then after Luffy awakened the Nicofruit, he was confirmed by Zunisha to be Joy Boy. Now, we do not know if Joy Boy is the name of a specific lineage of people, or if it is a title given to those who meet the certain condition of awakening the Nicofruit. However, if it is the latter, the case could be made that whoever got this devil fruit had the potential of being the main character of the One Piece story. So for example, if Ace, the son of Goldie Roger, got the Nicofruit, he could have been our new Joy Boy and the protagonist of the One Piece story. And even if it were the case that the Joy Boy lineage is separate from the Nicofruit, it still seems to be the case that there's some special relationship between the two that is of pivotal importance for the plot. So even if Luffy was the only one who could become Joy Boy, if he didn't get the Nicofruit, it is unlikely that he could achieve his full potential given the emphasis on the warrior of liberation aspect of the Nicofruit. So regardless of the case, whether it is the former or the latter, the Nicofruit is a very important element to the story of One Piece. And as you would guess, Shanks, being the mover that he is, knew this, and he chose to attack a marine ship specifically for this fruit, even when those low-level marines who were transporting it didn't know its importance. And despite having it before meeting Luffy, and for presumably a whole year before Luffy ate it, he chose not to eat it. So whether it was by fate or by chance, Shanks was the vehicle who got the Nicofruit to where it needed to be for the story of One Piece as we know it to actually happen. And based on his decisions, things could have been completely different or even cease to happen at all. And that is merely just one of his influences on the story from a foundational standpoint. Because remember, Shanks is also an active balancer of the ensuing One Piece world. What this means is that he actively operates to moderate the events such that the plot goes in a particular direction at an appropriate pace. So for example, a major world-changing event that never happened was Kaido coming to Marineford. If Kaido had joined the Marineford War, it is no exaggeration to say that the entire world would have been different. For one thing, the pace of the One Piece story would have completely been changed. Because remember, in the current version of events, we didn't truly meet and get to know Kaido's strength till Wano, which was post-time skip 2 years after the war in story and over chapter 900. Whereas if Kaido had come to Marineford, we would have been introduced to the power of 2 Emperors of the Sea pre-time skip and in the chapter 400s. That is a drastic alteration in pace. And as it relates to direction, if Kaido came to Marineford, one possibility is that he could have joined hands with Whitebeard to take on the Navy, just as how he formed a temporary alliance with Big Mom. And if this happened, the Navy definitely could not have held back, and it's likely that Marineford would have become the original Punk Hazard. And I mean, with 2 Emperors of the Sea going up against the Navy, the chances of getting Ace out of there alive would have definitely increased. And as we know, Ace surviving would have drastic implications for the story. I mean, for one, we could actually get an Ace, Sabo and Luffy reunion, which in the current timeline is impossible. And two, if Whitebeard had passed away, Ace would be a prime candidate to lead his fleet. Maybe not immediately since Marco still had seniority, but eventually that could be the case. And just as how Sabo is seemingly becoming the face of the revolutionary army, and Luffy has become an emperor of the sea, imagine the dynamics that could be interwoven between these three brothers, with Ace completing the triad of leading the crew of the former strongest man in the world. Again, the story of One Piece would have been completely different. And the other possibility if Kaido joined the Marineford War is that he could have decided to fight against both the Marines and Whitebeard. And remember, Whitebeard buttered up Buggy because he realized that the impelled down prisoners that Buggy had supporting him were strong, and he wanted to avoid needless casualties and complications. So having another Emperor of the Sea against him and his crew would have definitely greatly affected the outcome of the war, and there definitely would have been way more casualties on all sides. So rather than just losing an arm like Jozu, some major characters might not have been alive in the post-time skip if Kaido had joined the Marineford War. So Kaido coming to Marineford would have flipped the script on its head and would have drastically changed the direction of the story. But of all the persons in the One Piece world, who was actually able to stop this event? Well, you guessed it. Shanks stopped this world-changing event from happening, thus drastically modulating not only the direction of the story, but also its pace. And remember, even without Kaido coming to Marineford, if the war had continued post-Whitebeard death, there would have been way more casualties. We saw that neither side was letting up, and Sakazuki himself was hungry for more war. He wanted to take this chance to crush the Whitebeard pirates completely. And again, even our future Admiral Kobe, someone who was being built up from literally Arc 1 of One Piece, would have been completely erased from the story if things kept going as they currently were. But again, Shanks the Balancer stepped in and stopped the war, completely changing the direction of the story and allowing more characters to stay alive, thus allowing the possibility of more future plot points. And it is not just overt influences like this that Shanks does. Shanks also influences the story in not so evident ways from behind the scenes. So for example, we see this with his meeting with the Garusai, the literal controllers of the world government who are only below the shadowy figure Imu. And in their meeting, Shanks spoke to them about a certain pirate. Now we don't know who this certain pirate was, but obviously we know that this conversation between an Emperor of the Sea and the top of the world government would have obviously had greater implications for the story. So for example, some people speculate that the certain pirate was Luffy, and that this is why the Garusai, after seemingly being clueless about who had the Nicofruit all this time, finally figured it out and sent CP0 to Onigashima to deal with him. And other people speculate that this certain pirate was Blackbeard. And if this is the case, the Garusai would have obviously been making moves or preparations based on the information they got from this conversation, which you can expect will obviously have a major impact on the story. And I mean, even recently with the end of Wano, Shanks is basically the one who announced the start of the true race for the One Piece in this final arc, casually saying it's time to go get it. So without a doubt, the story of One Piece exists as it does and moves at its current pace and direction, in large part due to the influence of Shanks. But even if you were to strip away everything I have previously brought up, it still remains a fact that the main character of a story is one of its most important aspects in shaping the direction and quality of the story. And it is not an exaggeration to say that Luffy would not be the man he is without Shanks. I mean, in the anime, it is shown that as a kid, Luffy did not even want to be a pirate or even like pirates before meeting Shanks. Garp outright even states that one of the biggest influences on Luffy wanting to be a pirate is Shanks. And Shanks not only influenced Luffy to become a pirate, but he also influenced the type of pirate that Luffy would be. So for example, in Mocktown we see where Luffy took all of Bellamy's hits and the mockery without doing anything, and he only decided to hit Bellamy after Bellamy had hurt his friend. This is a value we know that Luffy got directly from Shanks, given that child Luffy was upset at Shanks for enduring the exact same thing. But after Shanks explained this principle, it seemed to have stuck with Luffy. And even outside of Luffy's inception, we see where Shanks plays a major role in Luffy's journey. Like Rayleigh, the first mate of the former Pirate King, became Luffy's mentor, in large part due to the recommendation given by Shanks, being that Shanks gave up his arm for Luffy, and Shanks was emphasizing to Rayleigh that Luffy was saying the same things as their former captain Goldie Roger. Like Luffy could not have asked for a better letter of recommendation, and very few other characters in the story would ever get the privilege of having a former Pirate King's first mate become their mentor. And I mean even Luffy's straw hat, the thing he's basically seen as synonymous with, to the point that some people don't even call his name anymore, they just call him Straw Hat. And even when some people say his name, they call him Straw Hat Luffy. And his crew are called the Straw Hat Pirates. And his Jolly Roger, the thing which represents him, and which now as an emperor marks his affiliated territories like Wano, is a skull wearing a straw hat. So even this thing, which has become a fundamental part of Luffy's character and his crew, was given to him by none other than Shanks. And it goes even deeper, because remember, Luffy set out on his journey to become the Pirate King, in part to fulfill his promise to Shanks to become a great pirate to return the straw hat. So you can quite literally say that the story of One Piece definitely would not exist as we currently know it without the red-haired emperor, Shanks himself.